Hi, this is Joe Welinske. I'm the program manager for the ConveyUX conference coming up in Seattle in January, and I'm speaking with some of the many presenters who will be there with us. Today I'm talking with Karen McGrane. Hello, Karen.
Hi there.
Where are you talking to us from today?
Today I'm based in New York, here at home.
All right, is that in Manhattan?
Yeah, I'm right in Midtown.
All right, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the kind of the nature of your work, the types of activities that you're typically involved with as a starting point?
Sure. So, my focus over the last few years has been on how organizations use mobile as a forcing function to get them to clean up their content. And I genuinely believe that organizations really benefit from having to focus and pare down and clean up some of their outdated processes or broken content management infrastructure. And if mobile is the thing that gets them there, then great. So I wrote a book called Content Strategy for Mobile that talks about how organizations might think about how they published all these different devices and the whole range of places we have to get content onto. I do a series of workshops and a podcast on responsive web design with Ethan Marcotte. And so I've spent most of the past year really talking in depth with a lot of large corporations about how they are making the transition away from thinking about just a desktop website to thinking about how they appear on all sorts of different devices and platforms.
So how well is that working out? Are there challenges in moving people to that kind of design thinking?
Yeah, I think it is really challenging for organizations. And honestly, from what I've observed, the design and development challenges are the easy part. For organizations to design a mobile website or implement responsive design, I'm not saying that that's easy, but the challenges that they really wrestle with are often broader organizational and operational challenges of how do they wrangle all of their stakeholders? How do they get people to prioritize and focus? How do they clean up their workflow? How do they get people aligned on reviewing prototypes and providing feedback in new ways? How do they clean up their content management infrastructure? All of those are, frankly, much broader organizational challenges that go well beyond the task of just making a mobile website. I think a lot of people out there seem to think that there's some kind of like responsive magic wand that they're just going to wave and the website will become squishy and then all of a sudden they'll have a mobile website. And it turns out that figuring out how to do that and do that well actually involves a lot more of the organization than people expected.
And I know in things you've written about in your webinars, you talk about adaptive content and its relationship and integration with responsive design. Maybe talk a little bit about your philosophies in that area.
Sure. So, responsive design, I basically described the ethos there as like the one web ethos. So, the idea is that you are essentially sending the same website, the same content, the same everything to every user, regardless of device or whatever you know about them. And I think for most organizations, that is like the baseline foundation that they need to get to. If they're not there, they need to get there this year or within the next couple of years. A lot of times when I go in to talk to people, the motivation is really around them saying, well, but we want to do different things for phones and tablets and desktop, or we want to be able to target content based on what device someone is using. And so when I talk about adaptive content, that's really what that means is how do you use what you know about the user, whether that's personal characteristics, contacts, device type, and tailor the information to them based on that. And in many ways, I see that as, I sometimes think of it as somewhat of a Trojan horse in that organizations get really fixated on wanting to target information or wanting to have separate experiences based on device type. And in many cases, their enthusiasm for doing so is not backed up by any genuinely realistic business goals, or the complexity of doing so is not borne out by what they're going to get from it. And that's not to say that there aren't scenarios where it's required, but honestly, I think for most organizations today, a framework of responsive design as the foundation gives them the ability to communicate with all of their customers equally. And then over the next couple of years, once they've got the basics right, then they can start layering on adaptive solutions based on, maybe it's device, but I think probably more productively, it's going to be based on actual user personalization and delivering more targeted messaging to the user where they're at. But the truth is, it's like I'd love to see everybody just get the basics of a responsive design solution down first.
Well, in your visit to Seattle for ConveyUX, there are a couple of sessions you're going to be presenting. One is going to be a workshop, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you also have your session that you've entitled "Content in a Zombie Apocalypse." So really interesting title. What's the theme there? What are you going to be getting across to people?
So the theme of that talk is the veritable zombie apocalypse of new devices and platforms and screen sizes that we're battling as the human race. And I described the zombie apocalypse as, you don't know what new device somebody is going to want to use to go on the internet, and it kind of doesn't matter which device you think is going to be the next big thing. Organizations that start thinking now how they can evolve their publishing processes to be more platform agnostic and to get their content into a place where they can get it onto whatever new platform they need to get it onto, those are the organizations that are going to survive the zombie apocalypse. And the challenge is really in getting designers and developers and content creators away from imagining that there's one real platform on which their thing is going to live, and instead helping them build a system that gives the design a fighting chance of working across all of these platforms. And it's tough. It's a unique challenge in human civilization, but it is the thing we are faced with if we're going to keep buying all these new devices.
We must survive.
Yep.
Well, and your other session is going to be one of our half-day workshops about going responsive, and you have a lot of the details about that workshop on our website. But I wanted to ask you kind of a little bit more broadly, just in that it's a workshop environment, and that you'd mentioned about helping people in organizations get involved with responsive. What are the types of activities that people can do to be able to prepare themselves for doing better responsive design? What are some of the techniques that you typically talk about in your workshops?
Sure. So I'm really excited about this new half-day session because I've spent, honestly, the better part of this year going out to talk to organizations around how they are implementing responsive design, what some of their challenges are. And in many ways, I think the challenges that they face and the kind of things I'm going to talk about in this workshop have nothing to do with flexible grids and flexible images and media queries. They have to do with some of the bigger organizational challenges that people face. So how do you prioritize your content? How do you make decisions about how you prioritize your content and how you clean that up? How do you think about structuring your content and having a componentized content management system that works along with your design patterns or your style guide in order to have components of content that are inherently responsive so that whatever page they wind up appearing on, they will be responsive? How do you get your stakeholders aligned on what the review process is going to be? So how do they give feedback when they're giving feedback on prototypes now? How do you engage the rest of your organization to help them understand where their thing is going to live on the page when that has to be something that's reviewed in a prototype across many breakpoints as opposed to a PDF of Photoshop comps. All of these are challenges that require getting everybody aligned on a new way of thinking. And so that's really what I'm going to talk about in that workshop is what do you do to implement responsive design that isn't the actual hands-on building a responsive design.
Well, thanks a lot for taking a few minutes to share your thoughts about responsive design and preview your sessions. And I look forward to seeing you here in Seattle.
Great, thanks so much. Looking forward to it too.
Thanks, Karen.